Hey vinyl community and other friends who've stopped by here, Mazzy here. I'm going to do something a little different this time. I'm not going to show records, it's not about music, although there are overtones of music. It's about cinema, about films, about some favorite films of mine. Not a definitive ultimate top 50 list, but 50 films I'm going to showcase here, or at least just go through rather quickly. And what these films have in common to me is that these are 50 films with rock and roll sensibilities. Now, this is my concept, so I can fit these in any way I want. And what I mean by that, they're not films with rock and roll music necessarily, or rock and roll songs, but it's about the characters, especially the main characters, that have sort of this sense of independence, of rebellion, of individualism. And that's how I really see the beginning of what rock and roll, how it first came out. It was musicians, artists doing things, out of the ordinary, out of the norm, not breaking the rules. Some of the filmmakers here break the rules. Some of them are very commercial in nature. Some of the actors break the rules, and some are very to the point. There are all sorts of films. Just a real brief intro to my interest in film. Growing up in San Francisco, I was fortunate enough to have the Surf Theater of Mel Novikov. Now, Mel Novikov started what is considered the first retrospective theater, movie theater in the country, in the United States, in San Francisco. The Surf Theater, way out in the avenues by the ocean, 48th and Judah. In fact, if you've ever seen the movie Play It Again, Sam, the movie theater that the character works in, it was filmed at the Surf Theater. It had the Cine Cafe, the first theater I ever know. This is in the late 60s, early 70s. First movie theater I ever been to that had a cafe that served espresso, cappuccino, things like that, not just stale popcorn. So I was able, he opened up, he probably had maybe 10 theaters by the time before he passed away. He had the Surf, the Clay, the Lumiere, he renovated the wonderful big Castro Theater in San Francisco. He had, countless others. Anyway, gives you an idea. And these were independent theaters. Obviously, when I was able to see a lot of foreign films, indie films, small budget films, things that became cult classics before VHS, before home video. So I was introduced at a fairly, teenage age to a lot of foreign artists and directors. So without further ado, I'll just maybe mention briefly why I think these are rock and roll influence. And again, not rock and roll in the typical sense of the music rock and roll, but just that essence of what at least rock and roll means to me, how the rock and roll speaks to me. And here we go. 50. Maybe 49, maybe 51, but it's about 50. Fellini's 8.5. Marcello Mastroianni, about the surreal film, one man's artistic vision, endeavor, grand epic cinema. I'm not going to read the back. I mean, that's not fair. When I saw this movie, it was like no other movie I had seen at the time. It was surreal. It was fanciful. It was gorgeous, beautiful direction, and it kind of got me introduced to Fellini. And I've seen all his films. Some I love better than others, but he has such an imagination, and he is his own artist. And the spirit of the character in 8.5, as well as the spirit of Fellini, just makes this a definitive music in this particular concept that I'm trying to showcase here. I don't have any Woody Allen movies here because I did a whole showcase on Woody Allen. I could mention some, but one of his films, Stardust Memories, sort of takes over or emulates this a lot and is very influenced by 8.5. Beautiful film. Amelie, I think a lot of you know this, The Spirit of Amelie. Beautiful film. This was, let's see, when did this come out? This came out in 2001. And it's just a gorgeous, gorgeous film, Amelie. Those of you who've seen it will probably get what I'm talking about, the independence and the originality of this film. A personal favorite of mine would definitely make a top 50 list of any list, but in this spirit, I think the spirit of this film really makes it part of this collection. Army of Darkness, part of the original trilogy, the third of the trilogy by Sam Raimi, who with Bruce Campbell and the trilogy of Detroit independent filmmakers that made the Evil Dead series. This one is the first one I saw. So I didn't see the first one, which is really scary. This is scary, but in a funny way, almost like Marx Brothers, Three Stooges-esque, and Bruce Campbell as the ultimate B actor is totally the rock and roll, the Jerry Lee Lewis, the John Lennon, not in terms of genius, but in terms of wit and craziness, almost a sad sack in a way, the anti-hero. So Army of Darkness, Sam Raimi with Bruce Campbell, the third of the original Evil Dead trilogy, and the funniest one, hysterical film. I saw this in the theater when it came out, and I howled. I've seen it so many times with my family. It's great. About a boy, Nick Hornsby book, Hugh Grant, and a young, what's his name? He's grown up now and is in all these movies now. But beautiful film. Oh God, yeah. Beautiful film. About a man, self-centered man who his claim to fame is he wrote or inherited money because I think his father, I'm blanking out now if it's him or his father, wrote a Christmas song, the ultimate Christmas song that everyone's heard. So he makes a living on that song, basically on the royalties and publishing of that song. So great movie, great film. Absolute Beginners. I think the first half of this film is incredible. It sort of falls apart. Based on a book, Julian Temple directed it, who is primarily a music videos director, British. He also did the Joe Strummer documentary later on. He directed, I believe he directed the Sex Pistols documentary as well. There's great cameos and musical bits in here. Now this one is really about music. Not strictly rock and roll, but very pop-oriented. Patsy Kensick's in it. Also, David Bowie's got a few bits in it. Ray Davis from the Kinks. Sade. Great music. And a great score. So this is one that the music is a part of it. Again, not all these are great musically. But the music arrangements were conducted by Gil Evans. So there's a little jazz pop connection there. But gorgeous film to watch, somewhat political in its overtones, but maybe overkill and didn't quite succeed fully realized, but I love this film. I saw it at when it opened the San Francisco International Film Festival, and Julian Temple introduced it. So Absolute Beginners, great soundtrack as well. Black Orpheus, this is actually music. Now again, as I'm continuing here, I didn't pull music related films on purpose. There are maybe a handful here that are included because there's somewhat of a story involved, but this is not about musicals or concert films or things like that. Black Orpheus, this won the Palme d'Or in 1953, and it's sort of about Carnival in Rio de Janeiro, but gorgeous film, great soundtrack. Black Orpheus, an important film in my book, musically. Bonnie and Clyde. You know, I saw this movie in 1968, Arthur Penn movie, when it came out. So that means I was 14 years old when I saw this. And this was the most violent film. And I remember my parents, when they heard I saw this, I kind of went with friends and didn't tell my parents. But they couldn't believe it. This was considered the most violent film at the time. If you know Bonnie and Clyde, now it seems tame by any stretch of the imagination. But the end killing sequence in the car with the, bullet, bodies full of bullet holes, and the car full of bullet holes. But Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway, Michael J. Pollard, Gene Hackman, great movie. It still holds up, I think, in a lot of ways. I just watched it recently again. Now, all these movies I've seen multiple times. Brazil, Terry Gilliam's magnificent masterpiece, interesting film, surreal, over the top at times. De Niro's got a great cameo in it. It just has this sense of bewilderment and how someone can get caught up in something just by an accident of a mistyped page or a mistake of something that dropped onto a typed page, and just things arrive. This is the first time that I saw Jonathan Pryce in anything. The great actor Jonathan Pryce is amazing in this. But Brazil, this track they use, I think in the opening or closing credits, is the Jeff Muldaur version of the song Brazil. Buckaroo Banzai, Across the Eighth Dimension. One of the ultimate cult films. I saw this in the theater when I was visiting New York, I think 84-ish. I could be wrong, but that's seems about right. You know, Peter Weller, John Lithgow, Ellen Barkin, Christopher Lloyd, Jeff Goldblum. I mean, what an hysterical, over-the-top movie with the aliens almost like reggae, reggae artists, reggae stars. Big Boutte, that's the main thing I remember of this movie. But a great cult film. Again, rock and roll sensibility. It just seems like, in fact, they were a band. If you see the beginning of the movie, they start out as a band, you know? Buckaroo Banzai, Paul Weller, who later became the original RoboCop. Again, you know, rock and roll movies are a lot about just, you know, people on the run and people escaping and running from life, running from their situations, running from their indiscretions. And one of the great films is a great French film by Jean-Luc Godard, Breathless. There was an American version. Watch this version instead. The American version was Richard Gere. This is the great version. There is a great, for the American version though, X did a great cover of the song Breathless, a Jerry Lee Lewis song. An all-time favorite of mine, but it's got, again, rock and roll sensibilities. This is the Criterion edition. I'll say this, I do collect some Criterion. I think I have some at the end here. Criterion is basically very similar to Mobile Fidelity, but for films. They take the best sources, a lot of extras, director cuts, featurettes, things like that. What's good about it, I suggest, they tend to be more expensive, but 2 or 3 times a year, Criterion has a 50% off sale. Get on their mailing list or look at Barnes & Noble, and they have that sale, and you can get great deals. But Jean-Luc Godard, Breathless. Now, a movie I did not show, the Terrence Malick film. Blanking on the name. Bad. Anyway, it's a very similar film like this with Sissy Spacek and Martin Sheen, and where it's these 2 young couples do some mayhem and then are on the run. So that would be kind of in this same vein. Probably one of the best original car chases ever. This and French Connection, but Bullitt. It just seems he's this independent, you know, takes no shit. The character that's his name, Bullitt, and Steve McQueen. Also, I love it because it's filmed in San Francisco, one of the greatest chase scenes on the hills of Russian Hill, Nob Hill, and Potrero Hill, kind of all through the city. Jump cuts maybe, but so what, in terms of where they actually are driving. But Steve McQueen, great 1968, I believe, film, directed by Peter Yates, Bullitt. I'm just going to throw this in because the ultimate, you know, almost like he could have been the manager. He could have been Peter Grant, the manager of Led Zeppelin, but Charles Foster Kane, Citizen Kane, the great Orson Welles, some consider the best film ever. Is it? When you tell that to people and they haven't seen it, they're disappointed. But it's a great cinema. You got to think of terms of when it came out, how it was made. It's a gorgeous film, beautiful film, great script, well directed, tour de force. But Citizen Kane, you know, I had to throw this in here, not just to be a cinema wank or a cinemaphile wanker, but it's a great film and I love it. So if anyone tells you it's the best film, I think it's certainly in the top 10. This is a music film directed by Alan Parker. I'm a big fan of Alan Parker. This is The Commitments. He also directed The Wall. He directed Evita. He directed Angel Heart. He made some great movies, great cinema style, great dark, gritty, or not gritty, but very cinematic, beautifully lit, dark movies. This is kind of a feel-good movie about some down and outers in Ireland and in Dublin, and they start this band, an R&B band. The lead singer's kind of a Joe Cocker-esque style type, and the success failures of the Misfits starting this band. So this is about a musical story, unlike many of the others, but The Commitments by Alan Parker. Children of Men, a time when having babies is illegal, or giving birth is illegal individually. Beautiful film by Alfonso Cuarón, who did my favorite film last year, Roma. Clive Owen, Julianne Moore, Michael Caine. Great film. Just has a certain independence and a certain thing about you know, the government watching you and taking over. And I keep thinking of the FCC with rock and roll and censorship and how rock and roll is going to destroy the youth of America. So that's why I included that in here. Deliverance. 4 men out of their environment, challenging nature, challenging what's around nature, the people in a different situation. The great opening, Dueling Banjos, became a surprise bluegrass hit on the charts when this movie came out. Directed by great John Boorman, who also made Having a Wild Weekend, the kind of bad movie of the Dave Clark Five in 1965, I believe. But this is such an amazing film, Deliverance. All these films you should see. Every film here, everybody should see. You won't like them all. Some of you will like more than others, but I still think there's a true spirit that goes through these. Come on, let's pick the speed up, Mazzy. Al Pacino, Dog Day Afternoon, Attica, bank robbery, gone bad, based on a true story. Gorgeous film. Great social overtones, undertones, many tones. Cindy Lumet directed this, an important movie from the 70s. Do the Right Thing, my favorite movie by Spike Lee, great film, social commentary, race issues, but just a great, in the sense of rock and roll, an important film. Beautifully shot. Easy Rider, what can I say? Goddamn the Pusher Man. Born to Be Wild. You know, Road Pictures have always been sort of fan favorites in some cases, and this just came out of nowhere. Not only is this great rock and roll because of the music used, and that hadn't been really done at the time like this in 1969, and this is now celebrating its 50th, directed by Dennis Hopper and with Peter Fonda and Jack Nicholson, who won the Academy Award for Supporting Actor, made him a huge actor, famous actor after that. But this was important because it was the anti-studio movie. It's like an independent movie. It went against all norms and sort of really pioneered what was happening. I'm really a fan of late 60s, early 70s American cinema, where these young sort of rebel directors just, you know, went past the bullshit of the Hollywood studio system and went on their own. And there's like some great movies around this time into the 70s that are amongst my favorites. And that, to me, is the most important part of the essence of what rock and roll is about, and why I'm including these as rock and roll influenced in a way, or the rock and roll sensibility. As I keep saying, hey, it's my theory this time. Maybe someone else thought of it, but this is my turn. Glengarry Glen Ross, great David Mamet play, directed by James Foley from the Mamet play, an amazing ensemble piece. Rock and roll at its baddest and finest, and cruelest and ruthless. I'm going to put lists on everything I say here today. But I mean, Al Pacino, Jack Lemmon, Alec Baldwin, Ed Harris, Alan Arkin, Kevin Spacey. It's just a wonderful, wonderful film about sales, about salesmen, about getting the shot, about selling. And it's a play, and it's still one of the most scariest things I've ever seen. And there's no violence in it whatsoever. The drama in this is just devastating at times. Gorgeous film, a classic. Gary Cooper, Grace Kelly, High Noon. Everything clicks up to High Noon, to that performance, to that last moment. You're expecting that the entire time until that, when the clock strikes noon of the final showdown. And Gary Cooper, kind of like, he invented the style. I don't know, invented, but he was a style that we see now with, we've seen for the last 40 years with actors like Harrison Ford. The everyday man, the everyman. It was certainly Gary Cooper. I'm a fan of Gary Cooper's on a lot of his films, but High Noon is an important film. Fred Zinnemann directed it, and it's just really well done with the wonderful Grace Kelly as well. There you go. This is an interesting film. People love this film or hated this film, by Todd Haynes. I'm a Todd Haynes fan. I'm not there. And he tells, 6 or 7 different stories, or maybe more. But it's different actors playing Bob Dylan. Everywhere, anywhere. Yeah. There's, let's see, who is in here? There's Christian Bale, Kate Blanchett. Kate Blanchett plays the greatest Dylan in this film. Heath Ledger, Richard Gere, Ben Whishaw are all Bob Dylan. And they do an essence of Bob. It's the essence of Bob Dylan. It's not a biograph. It's not about his songs. It's just a really great take on it. Again, maybe for the fanatic, interesting, brave film where a director takes a concept, a wild concept at that, and takes a chance. So rock and roll sensibilities at its finest, in my opinion. King of Hearts. This, as I recall, back when I was talking about going to the indie theaters, in the 70s, this was considered one of the big cult films before VHS, before home video. Every time this would show, it would pack the house. George Delarue made it, and it's with the great Alan Bates. And what it is, it takes place during World War II, and it's about he hides amongst these people from an insane asylum. Explosions happen, people are killed, and they let the loonies out of the loony bin. That's basically what it's about. And it's touching, it's beautiful, it's tragic. King of Hearts, a film everyone should see here. Was this what year was this? 1967, so it's early on. It really kind of found its way into audiences like starting around 1970 and beyond, with retro theaters like the Surf Theater I mentioned, and theaters around the country. It was big in college campuses too. King of Hearts, a very important movie, big cult film, but a great film, King of Hearts. Midnight Cowboy. I mean, this duo right here, the ultimate frick and frack in a way. Ratso, Joe Buck, great John Voight, great Dustin Hoffman. John Schlesinger directed this movie. This was the first movie, when this first came out, it was X-rated because of subject matter, which is really weird. This was the first X-rated movie I saw. I saw it in a theater, didn't quite understand it because I was about 14 then, because it was really, when you look at it now, adult themes, homosexuality, hustling, hookers, drugs, alcoholism, kind of the things you, as a 14-year-old, that you want to see in a movie theater and your parents want you to see, especially in the late 60s. But it won Best Film, only X-rated film. It was later downgraded to an R. But Midnight Cowboy, an amazing motion picture, and definitely with the rock and roll sensibilities. You know, this is a long film. Take a break, go have a smoke, a drink, a shot, whatever you do, because it's going to go on. Save your place, come back. Memento. This is Memento. Memento. God damn, Memento. Okay, watch Memento. This is one of those packages that are just drive you crazy. Can I just have a fucking picture of Memento? God damn. Memento. Okay. Do you know what this movie's about? Okay. Memento was directed. Now I'm blanking on his name. He directed the Christian Bale Batman movies, and why isn't there any things here? Okay. Well, I'll think of it. But what's amazing, which has one of the most amazing screenplays I've ever seen, and it's something I could have gone horribly wrong, but it goes amazingly well. And it's about just like Mazzy's having a shit attack here. It goes backwards. It tells the story backwards, and our protagonist is a gentleman who has a affliction that he only can remember 10 minutes of time back. So he does these tattoos and he writes things around to remind him what happened. So the whole story goes from current time to back to the beginning, and each time he has to write something down and do certain things to allow him to remember. Come on, hold on a second. Christopher Nolan. There we go. Sorry, Christopher Nolan, director. I just blanked out. You know, you just blank out sometimes when you're on camera and you're shy and all embarrassing. But anyway, one of the great films of the last 25 years, Memento. But you get these silly packages that don't really tell you anything. It's not the mint. It's not, oh, that's Mentos. Okay, so it's certainly not the mint. Okay. Jack Nicholson, One Floor of the Cuckoo's Nest. Great film. Milos Forman from Prague, a director, made this. This is one of the few films that's won all top categories. Not that awards necessarily make a difference, but this deserved it. Best actor, actress, director, and film. Jack Nicholson and Louise Fletcher won. But the entire film is amazing, based on the wonderful play by Ken Kesey. Ken Kesey, Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test. Ken Kesey, anyway, again, a renegade, a rock and roll style figure, not in the traditional sense, but from Mazzy's point of view in this video, this is it. So again, I think you should see all these movies. I think you should write these down. I'm not going to put a list there, but if someone is good enough to write these down, send me a list of them all. I will copy and paste them in the description. I need an intern. Where's my archivist? Oh, okay. But seriously, I think these are important movies. I think everyone should see these movies. But I'm a big cinema fan. Payday, smaller film, cult film. This kind of got noticed again this past year because Rip Torn is in it. Rip Torn just passed away. A lot of you probably know Rip Torn from the Gary Shandling, the TV mock-you talking show he did. You know, he was the producer. He plays the producer on that show. You might know him from the Men in Black movies. He's in that. He was going to play the part, and there's a whole controversy about it. He was set supposedly to play the part that Jack Nicholson played an Easy Rider, and there was a thing that he got fired, and Dennis Hopper disparaged them on some talk show, and there was a lawsuit and a settlement. I like Rip Torn quite a bit. Payday is a cult film in the early 70s, 1972. He's a country singer on the road. So it's a road picture. It's a picture of a musician, you know, alcoholism, women. It's just I don't want to say it's a tour de force. That sounds like something a reviewer would write. But it's an amazing kind of profile of this, you know, down and out country singer on the road circa 1972. And, you know, those of you who follow music and people in the late 60s, 70s, a lot of musicians like that to this day for history. So I think this is an important film. Daryl Duke directed it. I don't know anything about Daryl Duke. Oh, Larry Sanders Show. That's what he plays, the producer in the Larry Sanders Show. But Rip Torn, Payday, great film, interesting film, a profile of this guy on the road. Kind of a cult film, I guess. Right Stuff. This is directed by Philip Kaufman, in the film mostly in the Bay Area or in Northern California, about the the Mercury astronauts, the original 7. And the original 7, again, my generation grew up. These were our heroes, the 7 astronauts, before the Beatles came along. That's my Beatle connection. It's not really a connection. There's a Beatle connection there. Polish poster of A Hard Day's Night. The Right Stuff, a great overview. And what's great about this is before all the digital special effects, so everything is done analog, organic. But Sam Shepard is in it, and Fred Ward, and Dennis Quaid, and Lance Henriksen, and Ed Harris, and Scott Glenn. And it's just a great film about the Mercury 7 astronauts, how they were chosen. But again, it's like getting the band together. So it's got, again, rock and roll sensibilities from my point of view. Robin Hood. Errol Flynn. This movie is essential, great Technicolor. It's got that kind of, late 30s, was it 1938? You know, Technicolor, bright, saturated colors. He is so charismatic, over the top. God, I don't even know who directed this, you know? Directed by Michael Curtis and William Keighley. So 2 directors. But, you know, Robin Hood, same thing. Just, you know the story, take from the rich, give to the poor. But it's just a classic movie of heroism. I'm going to make a word up. Heroism. I'm getting to be like Steve Carlson here. Heroism. Just a great, fun, romantic, adventure, swashbuckling thing. Watch this version. Of all the versions, this is the version. None of those fucking remakes. Kevin Costner. Rebel Without a Cause, an obvious movie for the rock and roll sensibility. One of James Dean's, well, he only made 3 movies really. Great film. Sal Mineo, an amazing tragic part in that. Father's played by Jim Backus, Mr. Magoo's voice. But Rebel Without a Cause, Nicholas Ray directed it, an important film. Total comes in with the rock and roll sensibilities around the time rock and roll was really, you know, gaining traction too. So what is this, 1950 something, I don't remember, 1955. So this kind of coincides with the whole rock and roll thing. You know, I don't have rock around the clock here with Bill Haley, but that would be another one, Vic Morrow. But that's a little more obvious, but I think this is the one. This is the better motion picture. Run, Lola, Run, great German throbbing techno score. Great film. Tom Tyner directed it, and it's got Franca Polente, you may know from the first Bourne movie, James Bourne film, but great film, really interesting concept, great, but it feels so rock and roll to me, just in its essence. Reds, love this movie. Warren Beatty directed it. He won Best Film and Best Director in this. And also, it's about John Reed. John Reed was an American, kind of an expatriate who moved to Russia and was in the sort of the Russian Revolution, Russian cause, communism. But it also takes place and brings in the artist mentality with Gertrude Stein, and you know, Jack Nicholson's in it, Maureen Stapleton, Sorvino, sort of the writers' roundtable. John Reed was a writer and a political antagonist in a way. Is that the way of putting it? I love this movie. Long film, beautiful. This is like, to me, one of the last great epic films where there was an intermission with the Russian Revolution that happened in the turn of the century. I ended up reading John Reed's books after this. It just was a really inspiring film. Not to push any one political thing or another. It's not about that, but just of the, you know, the cliche human spirit of fighting for a cause and fighting for the people, fighting for the unions in a way. So any of you union fans, again, you go on this and, you know, people brandish you as a communist, socialist, whatever. But, you know, the essence of that is important because it comes out of things of social, people getting equality. So it's not such a bad thing in that, not condoning that. But Reds is an amazing movie. I think it's a perfect, epic movie. It's a right blend of politics, entertainment, Hollywood glamour, and independence in a way. So it definitely has some rock and roll sensibilities in the character of John Reed. Billy Bob Thornton. Hey, you're an actor. You're doing bit parts. You're doing side bits. You're playing, you know, lackeys and small parts. You write your own script. You write your own play. This was a play Billy Bob Thornton did. Finally turned into a movie that he wrote and directed, independent film. I was blown away when I saw this film. So Sling Blade, great film. Dwight Yoakam plays a good asshole in this. John Ritter's in it, Lucas Black, Robert Duvall, really great film. Daniel Lanois did the music, and it just got an independence of, you know, one of these people that comes from affliction and has a certain style. I mean, I won't tell you the ending or what happens in it, but beautiful film, really good story, and really gripping in a intimate way. Sling Blade. Slaughterhouse-Five, based on the Kurt Vonnegut book. One of those films that you never thought that anyone could make a movie on. Directed by George Roy Hill, and Michael Sachs is the lead. Music by Glenn Gould. Great film of time tripping. He gets visited from another planet and he trips through time. He goes through World War II, Dresden. Beautiful music, beautiful soundtrack, stunningly filmed, funny and dark. This is one of my favorite films, and I remember when I was in college in film school class, I wrote a paper on the editor of this, Dee Dee Allen, this woman who was one of the great film editors of the time, of the late 60s and throughout the 70s and into 80s. Dee Dee Allen edited this, and it's some of the best editing of a film I've ever seen at that time. So I did had to do a paper on Dee Dee Allen. Seven Samurai, Kurosawa, you know, one of the great, like it's, you know, the Americans, this was made into oh God, I was going to say Hateful Eight. It's not the Hateful Eight. I'll think of it in a second. Seven Samurai, it's about a group of I don't say missionaries that come and rescue a small town. Magnificent Seven. Magnificent Seven was the American version. That's a great movie too. But this is the original. Can you imagine pitching Hollywood? We want to do a film based on an obscure at the time Japanese film. I think it was Steve McQueen that saw this, that got the idea to turn it into American film. Steve McQueen's in that. Great movie, one of my favorites of those epic 60s films. Seven Samurai, really great. One more stack. Wings of Desire. Wings of Desire, Bruno Ganz. Wim Wenders directed it. To me, Wim Wenders has a lot of rock and roll sensibilities. He's a big rock fan, and he directed several of my favorite films. I think I might even have 2 or 3 in here coming up. About angels, don't watch the remake with Meg Ryan and Nicolas Cage about angels and someone dying. It's horrible in my book. This is gorgeous, beautiful, one of the most beautifully filmed movies I've ever seen in my entire life. It's slow moving in a time. It's in German, most of it. There's a great trapeze sequence towards the end, and a club sequence with Nick Cave playing and on stage and in the film. But Wings of Desire is definitely my top 10 movies of all time. Now we get into some foreign films and some indie things in some ways. Black Narcissus. I could have put The Red Shoes in here also because it's the same director. It's the same team of, let's see here, Michael Powell and Jack Cardiff, these British. They made two of the most beautiful films, Red Shoes and Black Narcissus. It's about a nun. And it's one of the most beautiful movies you've ever seen. Amazing film. I think it's the late 50s, early 60s. I don't have the date right here. Do I? 55, 6, 7, 57 maybe? Or 67, 50. Anyway, Black Narcissus, an important film. This is a Criterion. I just got it in the last 50% off sale, so I haven't watched this version. But I had the VHS for years, and I've seen this movie maybe 6, 7 times. Gorgeous film, tragic, beautiful. Another one from my Criterion, 400 Blows. Truffaut's first film, Francois Truffaut. Most Americans will know Truffaut because Steven Spielberg cast him and put him in Close Encounters. He is the French interpreter. Not the interpreter. He is the French scientist. And he just looks great in that movie. And he's all in French. But Francois Truffaut was my first foreign language director that I fell in love with his films. For 400 Blows, Jules and Jim, Don't Shoot Me, I'm the Piano Player, Story of Adele H, Day for Night. I'm a big Truffaut fan, but The Independence and this young boy with a single mother, just what he does to kind of not survive, but that's maybe, but just a story of this young boy, and Jean-Pierre Léaud, who plays Anton Daniel, Truffaut actually made three other movies, I believe, with him growing up over the years of this character. So 400 Blows, great film in cinema. Daniel Day-Lewis is by far my favorite actor. To me, one of the great actors of our time. I picked There Will Be Blood. Actually, I think I have another one in here, but I love this film because I'm a big fan of Paul Thomas Anderson, the director who did Boogie Nights. And, the last film that didn't get a lot of love here, Phantom Thread, is to me funny, tragic, and amazingly beautiful film. So I could have put that in. It's an artist at the peak of his, just an artist taking no shit and just doing some things, but that's kind of the take on him as well. Rumblefish, one of the smaller films by Coppola, Francis Coppola. Great soundtrack by Stuart Copeland of The Police, very percussive. Mickey Rourke and Diana Lane and Matt Dillon and Dennis Hopper's in this. Black and white, gorgeous film. It's an amazing movie and gorgeous. He made 2 movies based on S.E. Hinton books, this one and The Outsiders. This is my favorite. And aside from the 2 Godfather films and Apocalypse Now, this is up there in my favorite one. Harold and Maude, again, another film that was a cult film for many years throughout the 70s. Directed by Hal Ashby, odd couple of sorts, dark black humor. It's got great soundtrack or great songs of use of songs by Cat Stevens. For years when I worked in record stores, people were coming in looking for the soundtrack. There was never a soundtrack, I think, until the digital age. But to this day, as far as I know, there's never an official record of this soundtrack. Some of the songs were from Tea for the Tillerman, but there's several songs that have been issued on later comps and online. I think there's an iTunes soundtrack only, or there was for years, but that would be a great record store day thing. Soundtrack Tea for the Tillerman, soundtrack to Harold and Maude. Great, great dark black comedy film. American Friend, one of my other Wim Wenders films, based on Patricia Highsmith crime books. You know Talented Mr. Ripley. There's been a number of books. This was the second film ever based on a Ripley. There's been, I think, 5 Ripley character books Patricia Highsmith wrote. She was a writer, a mystery writer, that also wrote Strangers on a Train that Alfred Hitchcock made into a film. That's one of my favorite Hitchcock films, by the way. American Friend, Bruno Ganz, Dennis Hopper. A few little references to the Kinks and Beatles' Drive My Car, but not. There's actually a couple, I think, a Kinks song sort of in the background when he's in his. He's an artist who is dying of a rare blood disease, but it's beautifully shot, very Germanic in a way, but great train sequence of a killing in a train. You need patience for these type of movies, but again, I've seen this movie probably 20 times, and every time I see it, I just find the little bits really amazing, really beautiful. Bruno Ganz, by the way, was that actor you saw in all the Hitler memes where Hitler's in the bunker. That's the actor Bruno Ganz. He just died in the last 2 years. The ultimate bad guy or outsider or victim, depending on how you want to look at it, Stanley Kubrick's Clockwork Orange. I saw this when it came out in '72. It blew me away. Violent as hell. You know, the old Ludwig van, Beethoven's Ninth is centered to this. There are rock and roll sensibilities in him and this character. Doesn't that look like a rock band to you? The Mazzy flip there. Clockwork Orange, Stanley Kubrick. There was violence in England after that movie came out, so throughout Kubrick's entire life, he had the movie pulled. It couldn't be shown in cinemas in England while he was alive. One of my favorite films, Blow Up, Michelangelo Antonioni, Italian director, 1966. It's based loosely on the photographer David Bailey, the fashion pop photographer of the 60s, but it's surreal a little bit. This is not for everybody, but I think it's really a beautiful film. Vanessa Redgrave is about a photographer who's kind of a, he's just a driven photographer. And he is, you got to follow along. He sees something, he takes pictures, random pictures in a park, and he sees something. Could it be a murder? Was there a body there? And he blows up the picture and you see something. Just great soundtrack by Herbie Hancock. So if nothing else, get the soundtrack, but I think the film's, it's an important cinema. It's an important film of swing in London in the 60s as it was just kind of starting to happen. There's a great short club scene where the Yardbirds are actually playing, I think Train Kept a Rollin' is the song they're playing on stage, and it's the period with Jeff Beck and Jimmy Page, that transitional period, and Keith Relf. So it's really a great movie, one of my favorites. And when I was teaching my photography classes, I was showing this film a lot. Some people got it. Some students would say, "What the fuck are we seeing that for?" Be patient. Enjoy art, cinema, rock and roll. Getting a little crazy towards the end. Raging Bull, by far, for me, the best film of the 1980s. Jake LaMotta, directed by Scorsese, and De Niro's tour de force. Black and white, gorgeous film. Kathy Moriarty's in it. Is Joe Pesci in it? I think Joe Pesci's in it, right? Paul Schrader wrote the screenplay. It was great. Is Joe Pesci in it? I can't remember now. Joe Pesci seems to be in everything. Anyway, love this film. Raging Bull, you know it. After Hours, another Scorsese film. A little Scorsese film when he needed the bucks, and Griffin Dunn is in it. It's kind of like The Wizard of Oz. He's a guy that goes out at night, and he loses his keys, loses his wallet, and he's in Manhattan, and this is in the 1980s Manhattan, and he's just trying to get home all night, and he runs into all these wild and crazy and sketchy characters, kind of like The Wizard of Oz. There you go. and he's stuck all night, and it's hysterical. It's funny. It's a cult film, but it's a great film. After Hours, Roseanne Arquette, Vera Bloom, Linda Fiorentino, Terry Garr, John Hurd, Richard Cheech as Cheech and Chong, Catherine O'Hara. Cult favorite, but I think all of you would enjoy this film, After Hours. We're getting to the end here. Barton Fink. I could have picked so many Coen Brothers records and obvious records. To me, this is the ultimate artist locked away in 1930s Hollywood, or 1930s, early 40s Hollywood. The great John Turturro. He's a playwright, and he's lured by the money and glamour of Hollywood, by the studio execs. He's given a dark, dingy apartment in Hollywood in that period. And Coen Brothers really go with that, with the walls and the hallways. John Goodman does an amazing bit in this. Scary, creepy, and funny, and dark. And it's one of those Coen Brothers films you needs multiple viewings. But he's a screenwriter, and he's in this apartment writer. So he's the ultimate independent indie artist, writing and creating and just trying to get some success. He's kind of like the Elliott Smith, maybe. I mean, I'm just throwing that out here, of screenwriters, tragedy strikes, maybe. But Barton Fink, great movie. And I'm going to end up with my obvious choice, Hard Day's Night. This is probably the most explicit of the music-related rock and roll movies, just because this still holds up. Black and white film, made to cash out on the quick Beatles success that would fade in a year or two. And look at it now, we're like 55 years later. I'm making this in 2019, this video. This will probably go beyond my scope. Hard Day's Night. Richard Lester directed it. Great film. Still holds up. Obviously the music is amazing. So, rock and roll sensibility, cinema, 50 movies with rock and roll sensibility. Please subscribe. Put your there are a ton of others I could have chosen, but these are the ones that just came to mind as I looked through my collection and my my media library, or my film library here. But thanks for watching. Put in your suggestions. Like it if you can. If you do like it. If you don't like it, well, there you go. Mazzy loves you, and art and music and movies, it's all good. Take care, BC.